What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I'm back to you guys with another video, and I have a special guest on today, man. I have my guy Patriots Global. What's going on, man?
Yes, sir, JT. How are you going on, man? I mean, just thank you for having me on, man. It's a true honor to be able to come on. Long time viewer. Being with fan to fan and all. So I mean, I appreciate you for having me on, like always.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you for coming on, man. So when you look at the Patriots going into training camp, man, everybody's looking at this Mac Jones, Cam Newton battle that nobody was really expecting, but Mac Jones apparently made his presence felt during minicamp. I was telling everybody, man, everybody was disrespecting Mac Jones, tried to say he was carried by talent, which makes no sense because Joe Burrow played with one of the most talented college football teams in history. But whatever, people were hating on Mac Jones. The guy can't run. He's going to be a bust. Well, he falls to 15 to New England, and now I bet you the whole entire league is going to regret it for the next 15 years. Balls out in minicamp and has somehow turned this into a quarterback battle. So what's going on, man? What are you expecting out of this quarterback battle between Cam Newton and Mac Jones? Mac and cheese.
Yeah. So I personally think that parts of it are a little bit overhyped, but you know what? New quarterback in New England. First time Belichick has ever drafted a quarterback in the first round. I mean, the hype is real, and the hype is real for a certain situation and certain reasons overall. But I like to keep my expectations a little bit mellow because I remember way back when Patriots drafted N'Keal Harry in the first round, first time Belichick ever did so, people were off the rails about N'Keal, and right away after his first season, people were already down in the dumps about him because first round pick didn't live up to expectations. Now, I'm not saying this is the same thing, but kind of to guard expectations, I think some other YouTubers making videos on Mac Jones, I think some people writing articles about him are hyping things a little beyond what it should be, but don't get it twisted. This is a conversation for a reason. Mac Jones just fits in perfectly with what New England's doing, and he couldn't have went into a better situation. At the end of the day, I don't care how talented you are. I don't care what you can or cannot do on or off the field. To me, it depends on how do you fit within the system. And Mac Jones fits like a glove. All of his strengths fit in exactly with the strengths of New England. And the things that, yeah, maybe he doesn't have. He's not athletic. He isn't going to run past you. But that's never what New England has ever done. You look at what they did in free agency. You look at all the acquisitions they made in Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and Nelson Aguilar. They want this to be a better passing offense going forward. And obviously with Cam Newton, that's not what it was. Obviously with Tom Brady, that's what it always was. And when you look at Mac Jones, he's going to bring that potential as a passing quarterback, not a mobile quarterback like Cam Newton. And although he isn't mobile, he has excellent pocket presence. And to me, that's the important thing. I don't care if you can run past, defenders, pick up yardage with your feet like a Cam Newton, like a Justin Fields. Is that aspect great? Yes, it is. But I think a lot of people in today's NFL get it twisted, thinking that you have to have that type of quarterback because pocket passers are kind of dying out in the league. But just because maybe the dynamic is switching a little bit more to, your Lamar Jackson, to your Pat Mahomes, to your Josh Allen's, doesn't mean that that's how you have to succeed in the NFL these days. Your Aaron Rodgers, your Tom Brady's, they are still succeeding with the type of quarterbacks they are. And I mean, just exactly what Mac Jones is from Alabama is exactly the situation he's going here into New England. So, I mean, again, the hype is real, but I do guard people just because I don't expect things to be amazing straight off the bat. And it's not that he's looking like a perfect poised quarterback right now. I think that's what a lot of people are kind of taking it as. It's more so that he is developing each and every single practice. Now, does that mean each and every single practice has been great? No. He's had some great practices. He's had some bad practices. But the thing about Mac Jones that he's very hard on himself. Actually, the media noted at one point, like when he would do something wrong, he would like physically like hit himself on his legs to tell himself like, yo, you can't do that. That is not what's going on. Like, you need to learn. That is not what you do. And he said it himself in an interview. He's taking what he does well, putting it in one category, and then things he needs to work on and be better at, and putting it in another category. So really, each and every single practice, the things you saw him struggle the time before, he's ironing out. And at the end of the day, that's exactly what you want. A guy who's going to improve off of the struggles he had from the following practice. And if he can continue to do that by the start of the regular season, he's going to look like a more NFL-ready quarterback. But don't get that twisted. I still think that the smart idea is to roll with Cam Newton for at least half of the season, at the very least.
And that's a really interesting conversation because, like, I was telling everybody, well, everybody was saying this after the college football playoffs was over and we headed into the draft process. Everybody was saying Mac Jones is the perfect QB for the Patriots. The question is, will the Patriots have to trade up to get him? Obviously, we saw how that went down. They didn't have to do it. Now, you look at the improved supporting cast, the wide receivers, the tight ends. You look at a Nelson Aguilar. You look at bringing in Kendrick Bourne from San Francisco. Out of those wide receivers that you currently have, which ones do you think have to have the biggest training camp and the biggest preseason?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, everybody needs to step up big time, but I would say the people that need to step up the most, definitely number one is going to be Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar right now, he's pinned in as that number one wide receiver. Now, I think that this could really surprise a lot of people. Yeah, Nelson Aguilar is pinned in as that number one guy.
He was the best wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders last year, which people don't remember. And aside from having a couple of down years with Philadelphia, not because he ain't had the talent, he could get open, he can run routes. Dude just couldn't catch the football.
Yeah, no, and he's a good receiver, and he's looking like a veteran receiver from what we've seen in OTAs and minicamp. He's bailing out quarterbacks on some of their bad throws, so he has the potential to be that number one receiver. And right now on the depth chart where he's being placed, he is that number one guy. But I definitely think that Jacoby Myers could give him a run for his money, especially with the connection he already has with Cam Newton. He's going to be between number one and number two. I think your number one and number two guy is going to be between Aguilar and is going to be between Jacoby Myers. But I think because of the contract that they gave Nelson Aguilar straight off the bat, a lot of people are saying, that's a little bit more money than I think anyone should have given him. Say what you want about the contract or whatnot. At the end of the day, that's what the Patriots gave him. So I think he has to play up to those expectations. But what you also have to understand is, okay, what version of Nelson Aguilar are we going to get? Are we going to get from what we saw in Philly? Or are we going to get this elite number one wide receiver play that we saw with the Raiders this past season? If we get that guy, this is an excellent selection. He's easily a number one guy. But if he struggles with catching the ball, he struggles like he did, the last couple years in Philly, then we're talking about a different outcome. But overall, I think even it depends on the quarterback at play. I think that your Jacoby Myers and your Nelson Aguilars, they're going to be fitted much, much more well in a Cam Newton-led offense because he's much better at the deep ball versus the short to intermediate routes. Accuracy sucks no matter what, but the short to intermediate route, he struggles a lot more versus down the field. But if you're going to talk about a Mac Jones, he's going to do a much better job with the guys who are better in the short to intermediate routes with, let's say, guys like Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, maybe even Gunnar Olszewski. But I also know Cam Newton really, really does well with tight ends back when he had Greg Olsen. So I'm really, really excited to see the two tight end sets. That is something you are going to see heavily. And I say heavily in this Patriots offense. They are practicing day after day in OTAs and minicamp on these two tight end sets.
Reminds me a lot of that 2011 team with Rockentowski and we know who.
Yes. They're going to be bringing that back and super excited to see it. I know with Cam Newton, it's going to work out very well, but I'm also super excited to see that dynamic with Mac Jones because, like you mentioned, a lot of people are trying to say he had that talent with Alabama, and they're trying to say he doesn't have it in New England. And although they might not have those top receivers that he might have had in Alabama, they have arguably two top 10 tight ends and still very good wide receivers. So he didn't really have tight ends back in Alabama. So I'm excited to see that dynamic of switching, from elite wide receivers to having elite tight ends. But I would definitely say that, your Nelson Aguilar has to step up. And definitely I would say Jacoby Myers needs to continue to take that leap forward because he has that connection with Cam Newton and he has that experience already within the system.
Now, the offensive line, you don't really have to say much about it because we know that this is one of the best in the game right now. So we really can expect the offensive line to be an elite level unit. Like, do you have any concerns about the offensive line? Like, or you is good? No position battles, no nothing. Everything's pretty much set in stone.
I mean, it's definitely set in stone when you're coming to your starters from left to right. It's going to be Isaiah Wynn. It's going to be Onwenu. It's going to be Andrews. It's going to be Shaq Mason. And then it's going to be Trent Brown. What happens outside of those starters, I think that is where your battle comes in. I love our starting caliber unit. Don't get me wrong, but it's the backups that then concern me because Isaiah Wynn, he has not played a full season at all since entering the NFL. Huge injury problems. And let's be honest, what's likely going to be different this upcoming season? They did pick up his fifth-year option, so I think they do want him in their future. But at the end of the day, you technically need two left tackles because Isaiah Wynn likely is only going to play about half the season. So then you have to mix in that factor and you have to have nice backup pieces. I think what you're going to see in that case is your offensive line switch and you're going to see on when you go back to tackle. But what you also have to understand is Trent Brown. Now, when he had his time and his tenure with the Patriots, he was perfectly fine. He was healthy. He was a boulder. But his time with the Raiders, this guy could not stay healthy. And if you have your two starting tackles out, that is where a lot of concern is going to come in. So for me, it's not the starting unit, but it's more so the backup guys. And okay, in this situation, what happens if that guy goes down? You know, the offensive line is just going to be maneuvered a lot. And I think the good thing about this offensive line, though, is that they have a lot of guys who are so versatile. They have guys that can play guard and guys that can play tackle. They got Ted Karras back, who can play center if Andrews goes down, but can also play guard. So versatility is definitely the name of the game when it comes to this offensive line. But because our starters are so injury prone, you definitely need to be a little bit more comfortable with what you see from the backups.
So. Yeah, I mean, I've been telling people this, that the Patriots are professional scammers. Every time a Patriots player walks in his free agency, people think, oh, yeah, man, we're getting a great player. Then he ends up, crapping the bed. And Lord and behold, the Patriots get the same player back a year later at a reduced price. And that leads me to the next guy that we have to talk about, Kyle Van Noy, man. So a year ago, the Patriots said, you want all this money, we're going to let you go to the Dolphins. Goes to the Dolphins. Now he's back on the Patriots for less, man. Like, it's so crazy how it happens every single time. Every time.
Yes, sir. God's plan.
Like, the Patriots are professional scammers, bro. Like, that's the only way. Like, there's no way the Patriots literally can be like, we're going to let you walk and then know that this guy's going to come back. They're probably waiting for Trey Flowers. They're probably waiting for the last to cut bait on Trey Flowers. So, I mean, it's really crazy how this works, man. They want more and they come back to the same team for less. But you look at the linebackers, and just the defense overall was hit really hard. But I feel like the young guys, like, what's his name? Chase Winovich. You had Chase Winovich, who I felt played pretty well at times. Josh Uche played really well. And I was telling people, I said, listen, now that the Patriots have their starters back, with those young guys who they played last year, even though they may not start and get that much PT, you have depth there. And on top of that, you have good rotational pieces. So you can rotate guys in and keep guys fresh. So overall, how are you feeling about this defense? We know there's problems with Stephon Gilmore and whatnot. But overall, how you feel about this defense heading into training camp? What are some position battles that you think could take place?
So I'm just ecstatic when it comes to this defense. This to me, easily, this is a top 5 defense. I mean, I don't know how you feel. Obviously, coming from a Patriots fan, that might sound a little biased, but
I feel like top 10.
So you look at what you look at what they had this past season, right? Despite the step that they took back, despite the losses they had at linebacker, the fact that they could not stop the run to save their life, despite having Stephon Gilmore out for, I think, a little less than half the season, they still ranked 7th overall in defense somehow. The year before that, they were ranked number 1. They took a big leap forward this year, or this offseason rather, when it comes to upgrading that defense just all over. When it comes to linebackers, comes to the defensive line, comes to pass rush, they upgraded it tremendously. And again, they were ranked 7th this past season. So I still see them being a top 5 defense in this league. I think they'll take a bigger step this past season. Let's also remember that they had one of the hardest schedules last season, and they'll have one of the easier schedules. It's not, top 5 easiest or anything like that, but it will be a much easier schedule compared to last year. So I do expect this to be a top 5 defense as long as they can stay healthy. Like you mentioned, the defensive line upgraded beyond what I possibly could have imagined for one single offseason. Henry Anderson from the Jets, a veteran piece who's going to tremendously help the Patriots stop the run. Devon Godchow from the Dolphins, he's going to be a nice veteran piece to plug into the middle and stop the run. They got Lawrence Guy back, their key piece to the interior of the defensive line, but they also got Christian Barmore, the best defensive tackle in this entire 2021 draft class. One of the best defensive linemen, period. And I think this is going to be one of the better defensive linemen that we've seen over the last couple of years. Like, I think he's going to be up there with some of these names that we've seen, like Ed Oliver, Quinnen Williams. I think he's going to be up there with those guys 100%. And he's going to bring something for the Patriots that they have not had potentially. And this is a big statement that I'm about to make. Potentially since Vince Wilfork. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be Vince Wilfork, but what he brings, the Patriots have not had a guy who is so versatile, a guy who can get to the quarterback, but can also stop the run. The Patriots have always had one-dimensional DTs, interior defensive linemen. It's either you stop the run or you rush the passer. It's never both. And they finally have a guy who is able to do so. And I think the addition of Christian Barmore, the additions of bringing back Lawrence Guy, Devon Godchow, Henry Anderson, this is going to help the Patriots linebackers tremendously. This past season, those linebackers, it was depleted. The linebacker core was depleted, but it looked a lot more depleted because the defensive line was not helping these linebackers get open at all. They just weren't. The point of attack is supposed to be your defensive line. They didn't do that. The point of attack had to come from the linebackers, and it had to come from the defensive line. But that upgraded defensive line will now allow these linebackers, whether it's setting the edge or shooting the gap, to not have to worry about, getting through offensive linemen, and they can make plays in the backfield and they can get to the quarterback. They can stop the run. And this is something that I think with Josh Uche is going to be a big thing. Now, Josh Uche has having an amazing offseason. In minicamp, the 2 days we had, in 2 days, he would have had a total of 5 sacks. And that's just in the 2 days of minicamp. Bizarre. He's having an amazing camp, and whether it's stopping the run or getting to the quarterback, and he's going to be a key piece for this defense. Matthew Judon on the other end, obviously going to be a big piece for the Patriots defense also. But this upgraded defensive line will now allow, because of that help that they have in the interior, is going to allow running backs to be like, oh, I can't go up the middle. I'm going to have to cut to the outside. And that's going to allow guys like Matt Judon, guys like Josh Uche to be able to make more plays, and now guys to be able to shoot through the gap. And again, not have to worry about compensating for these offensive linemen now that the point of attack that the defensive line gives will actually be up to par for the NFL. I think you'll see more of a 2019 version of the Patriots defense where this linebacker core just takes over this defense. Now, something that does concern me though with this defense, sadly, is the secondary. I think the secondary does have a lot of questions. I think they could be okay this upcoming season. It's more so future that I have question marks with. But if they don't get something done with Stephon Gilmore, that's a big hole. You take a big step back. I don't care what you did this offseason to your pass rush, your defensive line, stopping the run. If you don't get Stephon Gilmore back, you take a big leap back compared to what you would have had if you were with him. Your number one cornerback shut down. You don't have to worry about, providing safety help. It's, hey, Stephon Gilmore, you got Stephon Diggs this week. You're fine. Everybody else, come with me. We're going to talk about your matchups this week and, who needs safety help over the top and whatnot. JC Jackson proved that he's a really good number 2 corner, but I think he proved that we're not too sure if he can be a number 1 just yet. And I'm not comfortable with saying he is. Jalen Mills is more of a safety, and that's where he, progresses and has shown that that potential as more of a safety rather than a cornerback. And right now with Stephon Gilmore out, we've seen him more into the mold as a corner, and I'm personally not comfortable with that. I just overall, in a nutshell, I think the Patriots have a lot of moving pieces in their secondary, and it's just a lot of things that still need to be figured out. Who's going to be your free safety next to Devin McCourty? Since Daron Harmon left, they have not found really that replacement. And then having your Patrick Chung replacement also, which is likely going to be Kyle Duggar. But again, just they're trying everyone in so many different places already that there's just a lot of moving pieces in the secondary that things really are not set in stone. I think, though, that if they get Stephon Gilmore back, that things become a lot more set in stone easily because you have your number one cornerback situation figured out. And that's probably, one of the biggest questions and most important questions on any defense, really.
So my last thing before we let you go, once again, you guys make sure to check out my guy, Patriots Global. I will have his YouTube channel linked down in the description and the pinned comment section down below. Give us your 5 players to watch total, the 5 guys who you're going to be watching this training camp, this upcoming preseason.
Yeah, so number 1 is definitely going to be Josh Uche. Josh Uche, just because you're hearing so much hype around him this offseason, just the player we saw within very limited time this past season, I think showed a lot of potential, and he brings something that someone like Chase Winovich doesn't have, and we've heard him in potential trade scenarios. He can be a guy who sets the edge. He can be a guy who stops the run, but he can also be a stand-up linebacker. I've heard people say potential Dante Hightower replacement. I see him more actually as more of a Chandler Jones-esque player rather than a Dante Hightower player. So I definitely think he's going to be a guy to watch because he could be a big key piece of his Patriots defense, despite all the veterans that this team has. Next up is going to be J.J. Taylor, the running back. And I say J.J. Taylor because J.J. Taylor is really the workhorse in OTAs and minicamp. The Patriots didn't have any other running backs in OTAs other than J.J. Taylor and Tyler Gaffney, who is obviously a camp body. J.J. Taylor has the potential to be an every down running back with his receiving ability, his running ability, and also the praise he's gotten as a pass blocker, which for his size is tremendous. He already had his redshirt year. He's shown a lot of promise, and the work one-on-one that he has gotten with all these other running backs out of the fold, I think that this could be a really, really, really big year for J.J. Taylor. Now, my next one here, obviously going to be Mac Jones. I mean, that's just a gimme. Just because, again, he's progressing each and every single practice. And if he can continue to develop himself, I mean, it's still going to be a discussion. It's up to him on how real that discussion is going to be once the start of this season rolls around. Now, I'm going to piggyback off of that one. I'm going to make this one my number 4 just because although they're kind of together, it is still someone to watch, and that's going to be Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton is still very much dependent on what the future holds for him and Mac Jones based off of how Cam Newton performs. At the end of the day, if Cam can perform at average, at least at average, he's going to get the starting job. You know what I'm saying? Belichick doesn't want to throw a rookie out there just because he has to. Mm-hmm. And think in a perfect world, Belichick sits back and lets Mac Jones take a year as a redshirted year to sit back and just watch. Belichick redshirts every single running back that he brings in for the first year. You're telling me he doesn't want to redshirt
even
his future quarterback?
Didn't even start Kyle Duggar. He barely played.
Exactly. Like they don't like to start rookies. And if you're telling me the future quarterback, the most important position in sports, he won't redshirt that guy. No, he wants to redshirt Mac Jones and give him all the time in the world to learn and be comfortable. So I think if, Cam Newton can continue to perform at least average, that will be telling on the future of Mac Jones. And then lastly here is not going to be one individual player. It's just going to be the secondary in general. That's just a unit that you have to watch just because it's going to be very dependent on, hey, who's playing here? Who's playing there? Again, like I mentioned earlier, who's going to take over as free safety number 2 next to Devin McCourty? The Patriots, again, have a lot of moving pieces within that secondary that they need to figure out. and just the secondary in general, whether it's strong safety, free safety, left cornerback, right cornerback, slot cornerback, the depth behind these guys, that is going to be something to watch, because right now with Stephon Gilmore out and the question marks without him, this really is a moving piece when it comes to the Patriots secondary. So those are definitely 5 things, 5 players. And I guess the last one's a unit that you definitely need to watch with the Patriots as we enter training camp.
All right, everybody. We have my guy Patriots Global on. Once again, thank you for coming on. Before we let you go, let the people know where they can find you and what you have coming up on your channel.
Yes, sir, JC. Again, I appreciate you for having me on. I appreciate you for letting me talk about some New England Patriots football. Truly, it's always an honor. More an honor for me to be on here than it is for you to have me, I'm sure.
I'm going to have y'all on.
I always love coming on talking about some New England football. But you guys can find me on YouTube at Patriots Global. You guys can find me on Twitter where I do live updates at Patriots Global, and then the number 2. And if you guys want some benefits from me, some exclusive content, you guys can always check out my Patreon also, which is linked in all of my videos.
All right, Patriots Global, thank you for coming on, and take care, my guy.